Hello everyone and welcome back to the Landmark Collection videos for Let's Play Prototype. We're going to start off with a really cool place in order to put a landmark. On the very top of this crane. Really like the view up here. This one's hard to spot. It's actually at the top of that other smokestack over there. Totally nailed it. Something interesting about this landmark is that it's on top of this little sign that says the Plang Earth Tower. I tried looking it up, and I couldn't actually find anything on the towers, and this is one of the few places that is actually named. There's going to be another example in one of the later collection videos, but it's weird that some of the named buildings aren't actually real buildings in New York. It's a bit perplexing to me. There's also a landmark on top of the roof of the same building. Now, you may have noticed that this video is going over 75 landmarks. That is because, now that we have collected these landmarks, it is time to tackle Times Square in its entirety. I did not mean for that to be a tongue twister. Collecting Times Square's landmarks will take up the rest of this video. And I will be starting collecting landmarks from the top left of the area and end at the top right. On the bottom right of the screen, right now, I have put a map of all the general locations of the Times Square landmarks. And as I collect them, I will be crossing them off. If you want to know where I got this little map, I will put a link into the video description of the walkthrough that I've looked up in order to do this, because I wasn't doing this by myself. Now, as the collection is happening, completely uncut, because I really didn't know how to sort this out instead of doing it in its entirety, there is something I wanted to discuss in terms of the design of the game at this point. I apologize in advance if it sounds like I'm rambling, but as I was doing this, I really got to thinking about the landmark placements in the game, and about collectibles in sandbox games in general. So I would like to take this time right now to discuss what I have been thinking. If you are unsure about how many landmarks are in Times Square, there are a total of 68 out of the total 200 landmarks, or roughly 33%. That is a large amount to put in such an enclosed area, but I can understand that Times Square has a lot of things around it. It's very busy, and even if you have not been to Times Square before, most likely you have heard of it, as it is a well-known place, depending on who you are. However, the placements of the landmarks in this area is rather erratic, and I don't find a lot of places where it's justified and why they're actually put in the places that they are. And as I mentioned before, landmarks are sometimes placed for no particular purpose. The more I thought about it, the more bothersome it became for me, because they're called landmarks. You think that they would have a specific name. Why they had the specific name for a specific reason. New York City has a lot of notable locations in it that could be noted with a landmark collectible, of course. Unfortunately, we've already seen an example of a building right before we started doing this, the Playing Earth Tower, which I could find no information on. That is not to say that there's no specific landmarks. For instance, in the last landmark video, we collected the last one, Landmark 25, at the Hearst Tower. You can go and look that up. It's H-E-A-R-S-T Tower. But there are a notable lack of landmarks, at least in my opinion. Now, because of this general lack of cool New York landmarks, I got to thinking about a purpose for collectibles in sandbox games as a whole. I find placement to be very important for making optional collectibles meaningful to get. A majority of the time, placements of collectibles is great in a sandbox game if it's done well enough, as it makes the player explore the map and all of its nooks and crannies that would not be explored otherwise. Some examples of past games that I have played that do collectibles well is Saints Row 2 with its CDs that it's scattered around everywhere, and also Grand Theft Auto Vice City with its packages all over the city. Both of these games put their collectibles into out-of-the-way areas, alleyways, staircases, like multi-level apartment buildings that you could just go up the stairs and you didn't think you could go up there before, but there's always something waiting for you there. There's also like the Easter eggs there, like some infamous ones with Grand Theft Auto where, what's the word I'm looking for? You weren't supposed to get there, but it's like you've done this amount of work in order to get up here, so you might as well be rewarded for what you do, and that's mostly where Easter eggs come into it. They also put these collectibles usually into buildings or areas you did not think you could get into before unless you did it by accident or other ways, like in missions. They made me see the game world in a much different way, which is more extensive, detailed, and large than just going into each mission and finishing the game, streamlining through, and then instantly forgetting about it. And I certainly appreciate the work game developers go into making such a detailed map. Comparing this to Prototype, on the other hand, I find the map to be, although really nice and very large, but I find it surprisingly limited when I compare it to such of those examples. For example, you cannot go into any buildings freely unless you're going into a mission or you're going into a cutscene, or in the middle of a mission you have to go into a building in order to get someone and then it goes into cutscene. Like, you can't explore them freely like you're doing in the map outside. Also, littered around the game are very generically named stores. There's only very few stores, like maybe Hard Rock Cafe in Times Square, like here, that are actually named, but otherwise they just have names like General Merchandise or Hair Salon, which is a little bit annoying, but I've kind of made the effort in order to look for a lot of those general name stores and just look at them. And I will be putting them into the end of main videos. There's a lot of them. Now on top of that, apart from the general named stores, there's actually a fair amount of ads. Most of them are fake, but there's some actual ads still sitting around. Most of them are GameStop and Game Crazy ads, but there are also ads still roaming around if you're willing to look for them hard enough. One of them being an ad for Jersey Boys. And if you have not seen Jersey Boys, it's a wonderful Broadway show. You should go see it. It's great. And it also reminds me that of this interesting fact that when this game came out back in 2009, the game integrated real-time advertisements. Like, it was pawned out for advertisement space for people who played the game. I don't have a lot of examples. In fact, I only really have one. And the only one I can remember, and that only one I can remember, is an ad for the movie Gamer, which came out that same year. I remember watching it, but wasn't really pleased on it. I don't think it was really good. But if you can remember any ads from back in the day, I will be really surprised if you do. Please let me know, because I find that kind of stuff really interesting, of who really was invested into this game in terms of advertisement space. So, collecting my thoughts about this whole thing, there's a lot of uneven placements of landmarks throughout the game. Like, there's tons of landmarks here. There's also 19 landmarks in Central Park, which I don't find it that bad, but then again, Central Park is surprisingly lacking. It feels small compared to Times Square, to be honest. But uneven placements of landmarks, the minimal use of New York City's sites of notable buildings, as well as a generically detailed world, I find the map for Prototype rather average to subpar in terms of content. However, of course, it has a lot of potential. I've maybe rambled about that too quickly, but I do think there was a lot of good things that were just missed. I don't know how much access the developers had to incorporating real buildings into the game, other than the obvious notable ones, and how much freedom they had to make an accurate depiction of Manhattan at this point. But if they had more freedom, it would have been a really good, vibrant representation of New York and Manhattan at that time, which would have been really cool to see. I may talk about these things again at the end of the LP, but I also wanted to talk about the technical side of the map as well, because in terms of landmark collection, that's the most you're going to be getting out of the map, because you're exploring almost every inch of it. I find that the developers use a lot of smart decisions in order to make a decent map. The map, if you haven't noticed, the map has an incredible draw distance in order to see everything way far away that really you can't even get to. They make an incredible view. And you'll see that with a lot of the landmarks that are coming up and ones that we have seen before. Also, there are no loading screens. There's no loading times or stops in the action. The entire map is loaded at one point, so you can go from one end to the other and not experiencing any loading instances, which is such a positive thing. From what I understand, I'm not entirely sure of the details, but I remember someone talking about when they were developing the game in order to make these kind of things happen. And here's the Hard Rock Cafe, for instance. But from what I understand, they lowered the overall quality in the game in order to make this happen. So they were going to go for a much higher, crisper looking New York, which incidentally would have led to loading screens and sectioning off pieces of the map, which they didn't want. So they lowered the overall quality. The game still looks great, though. So they didn't do it so much as to impede on the quality of the graphics. Although some people, in terms of reviews or personal opinions, have disliked the plasticky look of certain characters or the fuzzy textures of some places in order to actually make it look like there's some things in certain places. That is very vague, but usually I am. Other than that, the game looks wonderful. In both areas of content and technical ability, I understand sacrifices were made in terms of development time or whatever the publisher wanted. Incidentally, I will always find myself going back to thinking about what this game could have been if decisions were different or were implemented in a much more free way. So that's kind of my take on landmarks in a nutshell. So I will leave you until the end of this video while I go and collect the rest of these landmarks. This one's a bit of an annoyance. simply because it's on a very tightly small pole and you can get stuck here. So it may take you a couple of tries if you're new at the game and not sure about movement. You'll probably do things like that or fall off the building. And there is our final landmark. This will be the only time I will be going through 75. The rest of the videos are cut into 25 landmarks each. Hopefully I didn't make your brains think too hard. Because next time, after we're finally done Times Square, we're going to be picking up a couple stragglers and landmarks and finishing off with clearing Central Park. See you next time, everyone.